So let's do Vitest Browser Mode in 2025, bridging speed and reality. So one of the biggest complaints people have when they're running their component tests is that they're doing it in their terminal, and they can't really see what they're doing, right? So you're writing your tests, you're building your component, and you're changing CSS styles, and you're like, yeah, I think this looks good. But most of the time, you're actually, to get any confidence before you ship, you're looking in your browser, and you're like, yeah, that looks right. I can send that to users. And you also have tests to help you drive like your contract for your component. However, it doesn't give you full confidence. And so browser mode, for those of you who don't use it, which is a surprisingly, like I'm surprised at the numbers here. I was going to go for a basic intro, actually. So for those of you who don't know, though, browser mode lets you look at your components in the browser. So my name is Jessica Sachs. I'm a senior software engineer at Hero Devs. Previously, I worked at Cypress on the Cypress component test runner. Around Vite 0.13, I saw a message from Evan in the VueCore Slack team, in the VueCore Discord, and I spiked out something that looks very similar to how Vitest Browser Mode does today. And I used that as the base for Cypress component testing. And for about 16 months or something before Vitest landed, that's how I tested my Vue applications, was through Cypress component testing. I'm around the Vue ecosystem. I'm not a core member, and I'm a Vitest contributor. I also work on the Faker.js team. So idea of browser mode, very simple. We should be able to test the components that we're working on in the browser. That's where we're going to ship them. And today, unfortunately, the majority of the tests that we write for our UI components are actually not executed in a real browser. Many of you, God, all of you, I'm so proud of every single person here. I have all these exceptions that I usually throw into talks, and I don't have to do any of them for you guys. Today, the majority of the tests that we write for UI component are headless. And that's unfortunate. It doesn't give us a lot of confidence, and then we have a lot of issues where we have to emulate click events and such, and we just can't test certain things. Spoiler, we can now with Vitest Browser Mode, but Vitest Browser Mode brings the real browser component testing to you on your laptop for all Vite developers. So people have been asking for this from the beginning. As soon as Vitest launched, people were opening issues. December 7th, 2021, I think that's days after, maybe a month after Anthony released Vitest. And in the response to this, he said, hey, sorry, we're not looking to have browser mode. We only want to do node testing for Vitest. Try using Cypress. And comment to that was, yeah, we get it, but Cypress is kind of heavy. And when I was working at Cypress on component testing, that is the #1 complaint, is like, we don't want to have too many fragmented test runners in our stack. It's a pain, and you have to keep downloading Chrome and your GitHub Actions, and it's expensive. So Vitest Browser Mode, very conveniently, lets you work with an existing Playwright install. This is what it looks like for component libraries. This is a Nuxt UI test suite. So the Nuxt UI suite was written against Happy DOM in Vitest, and it mainly uses snapshotting. So expect blank to match snapshot, right? And it's not very granular when there's a failure. You're looking at the diff of HTML. And now, after I converted it, it took me 16 hours to convert 2,400 tests to browser mode. It was not hard. It took me 16 hours to convert all of the component tests for Nuxt UI for this demo. Afterwards, you can see very clearly, and you can interact with the issues. So Nuxt UI is actually a Vue UI library. It's probably the most modern and largest one we have right now. So it was a very good sample if I was trying to stress test Vitest Browser Mode. Cool. So one of the cool things we get in Vitest 4, and I'm really stoked for this, is the ability to take photos with the screenshot API of your provider. Provider in Vitest parlance is Playwright or WebDriver IO, and you can bring your own. You have custom provider support that Vladimir added this year. And for people who used to be automation test engineers, it's basically the WebDriver layer. So you can test difficult things now. You can take photos of WebGL components. The first photo you'll see on the Vitest documentation is that of a Trest.js, which is 3JS for Vue. And that was one of the initial goals when developing browser mode. I remember very early on how excited two of the original authors of Vitest Browser Mode were when they got 3JS, Trest.js, running in browser mode and able to take a screenshot and be like, I can play with it. Even though it's a weird component, I have confidence that my tests will run. I'm really excited that, and I'll show you in a second, I'm really excited that you can now get screenshot diffing right in browser mode. Like, it looks pretty cool, you'll see. You can get screenshot diffing as well as operating OS-specific and other production-like qualities that you'll want very soon after being able to take a picture and diff it, right? There's a lot of nuance into my laptop screen versus the Docker image in CI. And the guide that Vladimir was talking about goes into all of that nuance. It's an entire talk, so I'm gonna skim over that. But TLDR, like, it productionized the ability to go from page screenshot, which they added in Vitest 2.0. It productionized that ability and made it so that you can actually rely on it as a Vitest 4. Super stoked. So for component library authors or people doing weird stuff, that's all nice. For application developers, it allows you to really easily test, especially single-page applications. The more Nuxty, the more Nexty or Svelte Kitty you get, the more Svelte Kitty is a good one. The more server side you get, the more you want an end-to-end test because your routing layer is doing a lot of work, right? Your routing layers is making decisions for you. You have server endpoints that you're trying to hit when you're generating your component tree. However, for single-page applications, presentational components, or components where you're very sure how the data will arrive, you can get a lot of assurance out of just using browser mode. And so you can reduce the number. You still have end-to-end tests, right? But it's a scale depending on how server-y your application is. So the best case, or the simplest case, is a single-page application that has an in-memory router that you can mock out. Since all of you are testers, you know what I'm talking about when I say in-memory router mocking. Never gotten to go on that as a default. I like this audience. So let's see. The thing that you've been watching on the screen was me noticing while making this demo that it was very nice to be able to tell AI to migrate the rest of the 85 Nuxt test files and then watch it iterate with watch mode. So I was watching the AI do its job with a very detailed prompt after doing a lot of it myself. So I did like 10 files myself. And then I launched the watch mode in Vitest Browser Mode, and then I watched the AI do its little loop. And it did the rest of the files. And I was able to very quickly be like, yeah, great, stop. And then I fixed the things I wasn't certain about and didn't review all the code. It was a nice loop. Highly recommend. So Vitest can run anywhere. Vitest can run in Node, JS DOM, Happy DOM, and Edge runtimes. And so it's kind of an absent thing that you couldn't run the browser mode, or it was experimental still, because Vite is for web developers, and it was a little silly, right? It's kind of a missing feature. So now I'm very, very excited that we got it to be Vite ready. And what that means to me is that it has to be extensible, it has to be packed with features, and of course, fast. And people have attempted to use Playwright in a pinch to test, and this has been true for about 7 years, pre-Cypress, so let's say pre-pandemic, 2018. The way that you would component test is you would start a storybook, and you'll see you'll see the evolution of this after I'm done. The way you would test components at scale visually is you would start a storybook, you would build a single-page application of all of your stories, and take Playwright and point it at that. And so the cost, speed-wise, of doing this is a 2.5-minute startup, because we're in Webpack era, right? 2.5-minute startup for Storybook. And then you point end-to-end playwright at your stories to get component testing. And so the feedback loop on that is very, very high in CI. And so now, the speed of running something like that for a single-page application, like medium-sized demo, let's see. Medium-sized demo is about, well, all of Vitest UI took about 25 seconds. That's 2,400 specs, or sorry, 2,400 tests and 99 specs. Took about 25 seconds on my MacBook. And it went down, actually, when I moved off of headless mode. When I did the migration, it went down by like 5 seconds. And then I added visual regression testing back in, which was like about 200 screenshots. One for each light and dark mode per component. So it ended up being 2,400 tests in total. 200 of those are screenshot tests, and 99 files, but that took 27 seconds. So as far as speed goes, I am pretty impressed with that. My Hacker News demo takes about 2 seconds to run 12 files and 54 tests. And those include full state management. So Pina Store, view router, mock network request with mock service worker. So it took 2 seconds in a headed browser instance for that. If you turn headed off, Chrome doesn't have to render, it goes even faster. The headless version of those tests with testing library end up taking about a second. So Vitest Browser Mode is really freaking fast. And so if you're thinking about home rolling it, I think Tanner, when I was showing Tanner my talk yesterday, Tanner was like, but can I make this myself? I was like, yes, you can. But it requires a little bit of orchestration, and that's what Vitest Mode does. So what it does, in a nutshell, it runs Vitest in a real browser with Playwright, similar to like a WebDriver style solution, and you use the Vitest dev server in your config. So you use the same API, same describe, expect, test. We have improvements on that are not in testing library, and I highly recommend that you use the now documented and available Vitest-browser-framework, your framework of choice, because you get a lot of ease. You get expect.element, which is shorthand for eventually please resolve this element from a locator. So if you call get by role or whatever, you end up actually resolving to the element and then checking if it's visible there. There's performance benefits on top of what you might be doing in testing library. So I highly recommend you use the documented one. Let's see. It's not a new framework, not for end-to-end tests, and it's not replacing your existing component tests. You can still use testing library. You can still cut everything over with mostly the same code. I wouldn't, because I think the outputted code, if you use it as documented, is much prettier and easier to reason about. And there's also some edge cases that by forking the, we actually forked the playwright logic, not the testing library logic for querying. But by utilizing that, you actually cover up some, or catch some edge cases that you might have been letting slip in your testing library tests because of the staleness of locators. We deal with it a little differently. So technically, you call Vitest run. It starts a Vitest instance of a Vitest project, right? So you can run this alongside all of your node-based tests. If you have SSR tests, you can just run them all, and they all parallelize the way that you would expect. We call them workers when it comes to browsers. We have the term environments is overloaded in Vite, right? You have JS DOM, you have Happy DOM, those are all environments. Browser mode is implemented a little differently. So even while you're thinking of it as an environment, like you might hear another word for it. That's called a worker. So it spawns about 5 headless Chrome instances, and then it distributes the spec files across all of them. Technically, because we're all experts, geez. Please stop me. Somebody yell if you're like, I'm very lost, but I'm going to say, technically, what ends up happening is that you reuse the playwright context across all 5 workers. Right, so if you were to implement this yourself with Playwright, you would be managing a lot of the flake and the life cycle of setting up and tearing down and making sure those Playwright instances were available. So that's what Vitest Browser Mode does for you on the provider layer. There's a parallel implementation, of course, for WebDriver I/O. So this is what it looks like. There's a change in Vitest 4 for browser mode where Playwright is now a function. This is the Preact team asked us to reduce the number of dependencies because they are good citizens, and we obliged gladly. And now you import Playwright as a separate package. So if you were using Vitest Browser Mode previously, this is what you will do in Vitest 4. Also better type safety. Yeah. So now we're going to look at the Hacker News demo I hinted at. Let's see, I'm going to show off the speed. And here we go. Let's go to... All right, so let's just do a full run. There's a mode that I learned about today that I'd never really used. It's called standalone. It's really helpful for demos if you don't want all your tests to run immediately. Show it off. So you hit enter, it runs, it starts up, but nothing happens. So what you can do is you can go to the file. So let's go to, let's say, the comments test, comment browser test. You hit save, it launches the instance. And then you're like, oh, cool, there are all my tests. And it only runs what you have saved. So if you're working on a particular thing and you really quickly want to get something up, you don't want to run your whole suite, maybe it's large, that's how you can quickly show something to somebody. To run everything, you just hit run all. And then, let's see, it is done. There's a bug on the counter that sums up everything, so it doesn't take into account parallelization, and also appends. So this is an incorrect number. It actually doesn't match the terminal at all. So the terminal says 3.11 seconds. So there is a big bug on that on beta. So it lies. It's about 140 seconds off. I don't know. We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, so that was all of our tests. It's slower because it's headed. It's not that much slower, honestly. And that ran everything. It ran integration tests as much as you can integrate in a single-page app. A lot of these would end up pushed into an end-to-end app if you were doing this in your normal application. The comment tests and stuff like that would still be browser mode component tests if you wanted it to be. We're still working on the ergonomics of, in particular, large and scaling of the canvas. So this is the canvas pane, browser UI, and the dashboard. We don't really like how you have to go back and forth here. You can make it really nice, unless you have a very big monitor like we all do. And then you can go ahead and easily debug. It's terrible to do on stage. So imagine it with me. That is how a single-page application would kind of work in a Hacker News demo. Back to plot. Let's see. Did I miss anything on that? No, we're going to look at the code in the Nuxt UI demo. So we're going to do the live code in the Nuxt UI demo. So the big news I hinted at is we will be marked stable later this month. That's the applause moment. It has the pizzazz. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys. Sorry. So we'll be marked stable later this month. Version 4, thank you so much to the Vitest core team, especially, for really cranking on browser mode this last year. So exciting new features, I hinted at them. Visual regression testing, we'll do that in a second. Thorough guide, hinted at that. Please read the thorough guide. And you can try it this month or today with 4.0 beta. We also have the Playwright trace viewer, if you can get, it's behind the browser trace flag. And we had one ecosystem expansion this last year, quick added itself for a quick start. Yeah. Cool, visual regression testing, the curious case of the icon button. So how many of you guys have written an icon button? Yeah. How many of you have been like, I'm not testing the icon button because there's no way? Yeah. Nested SVG selectors, you're like looking for a class, you're like, but it's not always going to be a class, sometimes it's an SVG, I don't know. Why do I have to label it? Cool, so you can do it easily if you just take a picture, right? That's kind of the punchline of visual regression testing. It's like, I could do it correctly or I could just take a picture. And you're trading off, right, the security of knowing exactly why it failed and kind of being at risk of some async issues, right? If you have any loading spinners, which are disabled by default, by the way, or images is probably a better use case. If you have an image that kind of comes in slowly. So that little guy is kind of at risk for visual regression testing. We have lots of options to turn that off. We have the ability to inject CSS to be like, don't render the images. Images should be display none, or that's a bad one. Should be like opacity 0 with a border of whatever. So, oh, you lost it. There we go.
Almost now.
Perfect. Thank you. Cool. So quick demo. Back to the button. So we're going to look at some code. We're going to look at the button spec for the icon button. So here we have a render. This is a wrapper for your very favorite. How big are we? We're doing, that one was fine, right? Yep. Cool. We have a wrapper for our Vitest Browser Framework package. This is a very advanced UI library. It has its own Vite extension, actually. So this component test is testing the Vite extension that NuxtUI actually publishes. To get all those colors in, it's looking for a Tailwind config. It's generating CSS variables based on your primary theme. It's doing a lot, and you don't see any of it here. And in that render, the render is actually not terrible. I don't remember the state I left it in, so we're not going to look at it. But it was not that bad compared to not being able to do it at all. So let's fire this little guy up. Here is the full suite for the entirety of NuxtUI. Let's go to the ones that pass or fail, and only the tests. And let us try it out. It.only. Save, run, no dice. Button. Play. There's one bug that I've told Vladimir about yesterday. And he was like, oh, you have autosave turned on in your editor? And I was like, of course I have autosave turned on in my editor. He's like, I don't. And this is the bug. So we'll fix that, because I'm here, and Vladimir has my computer now, and he can reproduce the bug. But in the meantime, we're going to restart the server. Cool. So here's our ViteConf button. Boom. You can do some pretty cool things in here. You can actually edit directly in line. So hello Vitest, Vite, save, re-render. What? Told you I'm not feeling lucky. Oh. Thank you. There we go. Test. Boom. So edit's really fast. That's saving to my disk. Like that's going full round trip. Awesome stuff in the actual editor. So here we have the icon. Let's test that we can take a photo, break the icon, and that when we restore it, the test passes again. So close the terminal. I don't like terminals. I mean, I do, but I don't like looking at them when I have the option of looking at the thing I'm shipping, is I guess the distinction. So renders the icon within the button. Let's get access to the locator that is returned by the render method. Locator is going to be something that we can await on. So the render method is async, and everything that you want, all the handles, get by whatever, they are all available to be evaluated on demand when you want them. So let's await for the locator, await expect element, locator to be visible. Here we go, we're very certain that it's on the page now. And now we can expect. And if I'm on a real monitor, I have this left and right. I'm typing, I'm looking, right? I'm not even, it's really nice. Okay, so await expect element, locator to match, screenshot. Let's call it icon button Vitest. And so now on my file system, I'm not going to open it because I have a very large set of things here. On my file system, there is a Vitest attachments folder that contains the state based on this key. And we'll go over here. It says, hey, you have a reference screenshot. This is the annotations API that Vladimir was demoing. We use it here. So we have a reference screenshot. Let's break it. So button view, here. We have some nice slots, and this is where the icons end up getting rendered. Let's kill them, save, and then we have a breakage. Sorry, it flashes, I know. As an epileptic, I know I actually feel really bad about that happening. So here we go. We have our bad photo right here, and we can tell very cleanly that this is not supposed to be there. And we can open up the debugger. We can put breakpoints. We can do all sorts of things, and that's very nice. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to save. I'm not going to tab over so I don't flashbang everybody. And then when it's safe, I'm going to go back, and it'll say it's good. Yay. So, yeah. So, there's a lot of stuff in here that you might have seen demoed this day, or this week. You'll see the module graph that Anthony talked about. There's a lot of stuff inside of Vitest Browser Mode. It's kind of the culmination of a lot of the tools that the Vite ecosystem ends up building. Anything else? There's quite a bit, actually. Quite a bit, and I'm 30 seconds over. You want me to keep? Okay. So even though it's experimental, it's been adopted. It has over 5.5 million downloads on Vitest Browser React. It's actually only a slice of @vitest/browser, and we're trying to figure out where the other downloads go. And so we think that there's a lot of people using testing library with Vitest Browser Mode. Hands, testing library plus Vitest Browser Mode. How do you render your components, Browser Mode people? Do you write them to the DOM directly? Yeah, you render them to the DOM with like the native framework render. Okay. So each framework has its own rendering library. View test utils, enzyme, other kind of rendering libraries, and then there's obviously testing library on top of that. So however you're getting your components into the browser mode, lots of browser mode users, you should be using these. They're very nice. They give you that sugary syntax and also the safer, better locator pattern that we are building everything on top of. So, special thanks to the Vitest team, the community, and you. One of the asks that I have for you is please use it. Please use it more. Please give us bug reports. So I shouldn't be the one, perhaps, with the only autosave setting on to complain to Vladimir the day before the demo, in order to get that one race condition fixed. We really, really want you to complain to us. In Discord, we want you to complain to us in GitHub issues. The more users we can have, the better. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.